So, so welcome to this inaugural CPS-IoT debate. It's the first, so it's a new experience for all of us to debate in this particular format in this conference and forum. I'm Nalini Venkatasubramanian. I'm a professor of computer science here at UC Irvine, and I have been here for about 28 years here now. So I've been in the community for a long time, and I'm very glad to see everyone here. So before I sort of put the motion up and call an initial vote, I just wanted to explain the format. First, we need to thank Chris Gill and Alessandro Abate for envisioning this debate in this format, and for also working with the team to come up with the right motion that could be controversial. And we hope it's going to be very controversial. So my job is to encourage the controversy. So this is going to be styled in the format of the Oxford Union debates, which means there's a motion or a proposition that's up on the table that and we start with the sentence, the House contends that, blah. And there's an affirmative team and there's a negative team. And they're going to argue for their stances initially. And that after, before we do that, we're going to put up the motion and all of you are going to vote. There's a QR code and I will show you the results of the vote as soon as we have that pre-debate vote. Then each of these teams will come up with their opening statements. They have 15 minutes each, strictly 15 minutes to make a case for...
even the non-formal people?
You're formal for what it counts, yes. So, so they're going to have 15 minutes each. Hopefully, they're convincing you of, their side of the argument, and then we will begin the cross-examination as a community and as an audience. Usually, the way this works, and then after that, the teams will go off and they will, work together to come up with a final closing statement, after which we will have the pre-debate voting. The debate has to have a result. So the way the result works here is not who got the highest or who got the lowest, but who created the maximum change of mind towards their stance. So we'll see who did the best in changing your mind. And so that's declared the winner. And so that's where we are. We have a lot of time for audience participation. Again, in the interest of fairness, we have two mics here. If you have a question or are speaking against the affirmative team, go there. If you're have a question and speaking against the negative team, please go there so that I can make sure that both teams get an equal set of questions. And that's the cross-examination part, okay? And then that's how this is going to work. So this is the motion or proposition on the table, and it's a mouthful, but you'll take a look at it. It says the inherent complexity of modern engineering challenges, such as intelligent systems, full autonomy, renders exhaustive mathematical analysis overkill. So we're claiming that mathematical analysis is overkill, and that an iterative, adaptive design approach should be prioritized, even for life-critical systems. So I don't want to put opinions. You can interpret this. I think each of the teams will give their opinions and their interpretations of these statements. And at this point, usually in this, there's, as I said, there's a positive team, an affirmative team, and a negative team. And usually somebody from the affirmative team introduces the rest of the members, and somebody from the negative team introduces the rest of the members. But I'm the moderator, so I'm going to usurp that option, because we have such distinguished folks here who are representing both teams and who have been in the community for now decades. So on the affirmative team, we have Professor Srivastava, no stranger, comes in from the census, CPS, time management communities. He has led CPS projects in the past. He's a distinguished professor and vice chair at the ECE department at the University of California, Los Angeles. I'll keep the introduction short. We also have on the affirmative team, Professor Tarek Abdelzaher, who has recently done a lot of work on battlefield IoT. And he's the Willett Faculty Scholar and is at the Department of Computer Science at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. Finally, we have Professor Anthony Rowe, who's the Seawork Walker Family Professor at Carnegie Mellon in the ECE department. He's also the chief scientist at Bosch. And as you will see, all of the different folks on these teams have very unique perspectives in terms of the applications that they have dealt with in detail for CPS systems. So that's your affirmative team. On the negative team, we have, and I think this is in the order in which people are presenting their statements. We have Dr. Georgios Fainekos, a senior principal scientist at Toyota Motor North America R&D. And Georgios, obviously being from Toyota, has a lot of work in autonomy and autonomous vehicles. And he's going to argue for the need for more rigorous mathematical foundations and basis. We also have Sayan Mitra, formal method scholar, John Bardeen faculty scholar in the Department of ECE at the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign. So we have Urbana-Champaign fighting Urbana-Champaign here. And and finally, we have Professor Oleg Sokolsky. He, again, has a long history in formal verification, formal methods, and rigorous methodologies for cyber-physical systems, especially medical cyber-physical systems, from the Department of Computer and Information Science at the University of Pennsylvania. So that's your team. They're going to start with these statements, but before that, everybody, you can scan in the QR code, and I think there's also some papers floating around. So please vote only once, in the interest of fairness. By the way, the two teams don't know what each other are speaking, so it's a complete surprise to both of them. Towards the end, depending on how many questions all of you have, I may give a chance for each team to quiz the other team, and for the team to respond, each team to respond back, okay? All right. So anybody didn't get the, oh, look at this. Coffee, water, I'm ready to fight. I'm supposed to be neutral, right? I'm supposed to be non-biased, non-opinionated. But it also says I have the license to be two-sided. So one of those unique situations, so yeah. So I'm gonna move on and get to the actual results of the vote. I think I have it up here. Okay. This is where we are so far. Has everybody voted? Anybody who hasn't voted? There. Vote.
I know.
Do you need the QR code again? Let me. Okay. Ready, everyone? So we'll start, as is the tradition with these Oxford debates. We're going to start with the affirmative team. I guess you could view it as a positive. We get the first statement, but then they could view it as a positive because they get to rebut that statement too. So works both ways. Okay, so here are that's your slides, right? Okay, here we go.
Dear friends and opponents, worthy opponents. I'll summarize the case for our team, why adaptive beats exhaustive. And the three main arguments we are going to present. Argument one is the world is way too uncertain and variable. Essentially, certainty can be a comfort, but really it's not. Okay, when things fail, you have to recover from it. And in some ways, yesterday's keynote speaker also kind of highlighted that how there is no certainty, even when Mars may not be life critical, but certainly high stake. Then my colleague he's going to make the argument that we are living through this phase where the kind of systems we need and are building, they have far exceeded the capability of what we can verify. So right there between kind of developments on the platforms and the type of elements we are incorporating into our system. So proofs don't scale, unfortunately, despite what the other side may think of. So, and so don't let this intellectual desire for rigor come in the way of capability. Our society needs those capabilities. We don't want systems which are serving extremely critical and important purposes for us. And finally, edge cases abound, and edge cases, by the very definition, are hard to anticipate. You encounter them, you don't know them about them upfront. So you don't really design for it, but you really create a system which, as it encounters, and a design process around it. Again, a point which yesterday's speaker also so eloquently brought out, both adaptivity within and an agile development process. So our message is going to be verify less, observe more, design fast, adapt even more. Systems which think they know it all don't work. So I'm going to focus on the uncertainty part, uncertainty in the real world. And most systems we are designing are for the society, right? Whether it's battlefield, whether it's medical systems, whether it's things in your car. And humans are non-deterministic. Our behaviors, our physiology, all aspects of us change. And therefore, any system interacting with this is a huge source of uncertainty. Of course, there are others. Even when humans aren't there, kind of the physics of whether it's Earth or Mars is way too uncertain. Within mHealth, which is the area that I worked quite a bit in recent years, there's considerable variation both for an individual over time. We age, we go through different contexts, but also individual to individual. So a system that you can prove something about is going to be too dangerous because it would fail to anticipate what my needs are. So whether it is an insulin pump where sort of on a plot, kind of our glycemic response to different things are vastly different, it's just not possible. Adaptation has to be the key. Even FDA has recognized this, and kind of things like reinforcement learning-based systems are coming, and the trick there is to monitor intensively, and then both at a design process level as well as at the system level. Another area which sort of I've been engaged in, personalized healthcare systems for mental health. And in this case, LLMs, which are kind of as non-provable as it gets, are playing a supremely important role because they're letting these systems scale to the vast majority. Health access is paramount. And so again, in this case, also personalization becomes extremely important. Adaptation becomes very important. Revising your guardrails, companies which roll out AI-based systems and all, the ML models are updated frequently precisely because edge cases are encountered, and then kind of they have to react to that. So trustworthy interventions in mHealth indeed require kind of this kind of a mindset. You can't just have a frozen system. So my submission to you is that kind of we should design systems so that we sense, monitor both for this quick loop of adaptation and the slower loop of an agile development process. And when variability is there, well, adaptability and a rapid design process are your friends, not the proofs. So, Tarek.
So I want to focus on kind of one maybe argument why it may be true that we need to start thinking about adaptation as opposed to building systems that are sort of correct by design. My argument is that building systems that are correct by design is going to be increasingly harder, and instead we have to think more in terms of resilience. The system is faulty, but it can recover somehow when it fails. And the complexity argument, I kind of feel I'm sort of almost from my roots are kind of in between those two tables. So I was trying to think sort of what happens as computing capacity kind of grows. When computing capacity grows, two things happen. One is the systems grow because software is kind of like gas. It takes all available space to it. So software is going to become bigger. But verification tools will also become better because they can take advantage of that computing capacity, right? And so, I try to kind of think, go through this mental exercise of sort of, so what is the eventual kind of asymptotic behavior of these improvements? And you can argue that as capacity grows, let's say linearly, systems grow linearly, so they'll have more components, but then the interactive complexity between these components will actually grow exponentially. If you have n components, there are 2 to the n possibilities of interaction. And therefore, the amount of effort you need to put into this to understand all the possible interactions and their implications also grows exponentially. And so you have this exponential demand on kind of verification demands for linear growth in capacity. Another way of putting it is that if you're kind of constrained by linear growth in capacity, you can only understand kind of a logarithmic fraction of the system. So if you believe that, then basically we're saying as systems grow, systems grow linearly with available capacity, but the formal understanding of these systems, it kind of grows only logarithmically because it needs this exponential amount of resources to understand something that grows linearly. So if that is really the case, it actually means we're in a bit of a trouble because the gap is growing between the frontier of how big the systems can be and what fraction of that these tools can really understand. The way currently we deal with that is we're very good at sort of restricting that interactive complexity, that exponential set of possibilities of sort of what can happen to the system by interesting design ideas. And that's how we currently deal with that trend. But asymptotically in the future, it'll become harder and harder to do so. So you will have systems that are fully understood. Even today, one can argue that we're already seeing these patterns that you can't get high performance and robustness at the same time. To get robustness, you kind of need simplicity, but that implies low capability. To get high capability, you need complexity, but that implies possible vulnerabilities. And previous slide says the gap between these high performance solutions and the safe solutions is probably going to grow exponentially. So there's many examples of that. I'm from real-time computing, so if you look at something like mixed criticality scheduling in real time, if you pessimistically estimate worst-case execution time of tasks, it'll be safe, right? But it'll be kind of low performance because you're so pessimistic. If you optimistically estimate the worst-case execution time of task, you'll get high performance because you can put many of them on the processor, but you might get deadline misses. And so the problem is you can't reconcile those two extremes. What do we do? One possible sort of solution is, sure, design for performance, but put guardrails. This picture here is an interesting, complex, unpredictable, very error-prone natural intelligence. It learns from errors, and it's wearing a guardrail, and the guardrail doesn't understand how that person thinks, but it kind of works. And there's a lot of actually interesting examples of guardrails in cyber physical systems, collision avoidance, overrides, kind of more complex navigation, maybe commander approval needs to precede lethal AI action. Local PID controllers can override unreachable sort of wallet predictive controllers if they're over a network. So this way you don't have to worry about the complexity of the network, you don't have to worry about the complexity of the navigation, you don't have to worry about errors in AI action. Even things like digital twins can fact check LLM hallucination. So maybe that's the way forward. Build it, adapt to errors.
So for our last and final argument, I want to talk about a potential solution through iterative test and refinement. And for this, I want to draw inspiration from an overarching theme in the hit TV show, The Walking Dead, which is really that the only guarantee in life is death, and the only way to deal with it is to keep moving. There's wisdom in this for future system designers. So I would argue data-driven design, the question is, does it actually make this worse? I would argue that it makes it better. So what it comes down to is when you're doing testing on a system, endurance runs, you're using mathematical techniques, whatever you want to do. there's the good side of that distribution, and then there's the bad side. And so what this all comes down to is basically capturing that tail. And the question is, do these data-driven future systems engineers, do they end up looking like a silly cat chasing their tail? I'll come back to this later. I'd argue no, that we actually have tools that are available now that dramatically actually make this process of designing systems and integrating new information much simpler and easier. So I'm going to give a quick example from industry. So I've done a lot of work in advanced driver assist systems, ADAS. And the typical way you do this, you have a time domain system, you go through sort of a classical 3-stage pipeline. Each step along the way, you lose tons of information about the system. So what we're already starting to see vendors and industry do is perform sort of learning based on point cloud outputs, for example. And this could be for radar, it could be for vision. But really, the future of this is pushing lower in the stack, doing deeper and deeper learning, bringing that down closer to the raw data where typical signal processing systems are very hard to understand and comprehend. And we're seeing orders of magnitude improvement in performance there. If you look at trends in industry, NVIDIA wants to go even deeper. They want input directly, learning output. And the question is, how do you make that safer? So obviously, you've got to learn from catching all these rare events. And the powerful tools we have now, we have increasing compute and storage capacity. We have more overhead. We've got large models that can sort of capture a corpus of information about the environment, the world, and do higher level reasoning. We're getting great at doing fine tunes and building guardrails for all of these things. So the question is, where does the CPS and IoT community go moving forward? So one word of caution, good theory is informed by observation. So in this world, just because something's mathematically sound and rigorous contribution doesn't mean it's actually going to get adopted. Field of Dreams, it works great for a movie. It's not going to actually pan out in reality. A second sort of thing to keep in mind is we're absolutely at a critical moment as a community. Machine learning communities are exploding. Paper counts are going up exponentially. We do not want to be that dinosaur that gets completely obliterated. So if the status quo is sort of extinction on the horizon, a short-term patch might be to wrap ourselves in it. Let's grab machine learning. Let's put LLMs at the core of everything we do. Are we really gaining like deep insight and understanding? I would argue that this community has the right set of people through sensing, through optimization, estimation, rigorous mathematics, but also through sort of innovative system building, understanding, that we can in fact not be the cat that's chasing its tail. We can grab machine learning and we can juice it for what it's worth for a great and powerful future of CPS. So in closing, I'd like to just say, let us prioritize adaptive realism over exhaustive idealism, build systems that adopt engineering methods that continually learn, adapt, and protect in the real world, not just on paper. We want to deploy this stuff in practice. Thank you.
Okay, so the world is highly variable. It's getting too big. So build, test, refine, repeat. Build, test, refine, repeat. Summary, right? Okay, that's my summary. Anyway, so now we're going to hear from the other team. And thank you for being on time.
Right, you can take your time. Huh?
No, you get 15 minutes as well. I got the gavel here.
All right. Right, thank everybody for being here. Thanks to the affirmative team. We are the negative team to protect with proofs against the AI monster. All right, iterative design. We have heard this before. Every time a new technology comes along, people say, oh, yeah, just go ahead, break things. You can break things until the nuclear wake-up call comes. And early on, they had started building the first power plants, nuclear energy power plant generation. And after almost a major structural deficiency that they had missed, they decided it's a good idea to hold a little bit back and come up with assurance cases, right? Come up with some mathematical modeling, derive some guarantees about the system that you're building, so that we can all feel safe being near a nuclear power plant. And so far, we all feel very good. Okay, not very good, but at least we are not scared being near a power plant. So mathematical guarantees contribute towards building safe systems. The same story repeats with aircrafts. Back in the 70s, we said, okay, this is enough. Let's start building assurance cases, and let's add some safety analysis on our systems, and look where we have gotten these days, right? From the high numbers back in the 70s, now we are down to almost 0 accidents, lethal accidents per million commercial flights globally, right? Do you remember this? Right, this is for the older to remember and the younger to learn, since they have not seen this before. People back then were saying, oh, formal methods will never scale. And maybe that's true a little bit, but until they did, right? And Microsoft, with formal methods, was able to do the right abstractions, interject the right tools at the right time, and build the processes to create more robust systems. Amazon is doing model checking on the fly, right? So these are happening right now. These are real applications of formal methods in practice, improving system quality and performance. And there are tens of tools out there that use formal methods in digital design, improving the system performance and reducing the number of bugs. In embedded system, and we have some colleagues here from MathWorks building these tools here in the conference. And we can even have fully proven signals for railways in Europe, right? So these are all advancements that would never happen if people were saying, oh, formal methods will never scale, formal methods will never deliver. And going back to our esteemed colleagues here, proposition for iterative design, of course, all design is iterative, but we have a big component there. We use models for mathematical models for prediction. And we had great successes using models, Boolean models, using models from first principles based on physics, where you do the design, the experiment, you build a model from first principles, then you do your mathematical analysis to come up with some predictable guarantees about the system performance. Now the question is, if we have foundation models, data-driven models, what can we do? And of course, the naysayers will say, okay, you cannot do it. It will never scale. They were wrong back then. They are wrong now. So we are going to prove them wrong. We'll have ongoing research. Many here in this community are developing tools to address the limitations and establish properties about neural network-based systems. Of course, I'm going to make here the call for more investment so that we can keep making progress in the area. And I'll close with this. The big questions for the purely data-driven systems are, how do we specify system safety? When you want to deploy an autonomous system, you would like to say something about the safety. Formal methods can even help specify what you're looking for, right? That would be one benefit of utilizing formal methods, even if you don't have the tools right now to deliver safe systems. Other questions, when are we satisfied with safety? Do we have enough data? How do we fix bugs? And I'm going to make here, they already mentioned about corner cases, but how many corner cases are you willing to accept before, when things go bad? Who pays the cost of these corner cases? We have to eliminate corner cases. And these are not random things, are happening in practice right now. Okay. And I'll pass to Sayan now.
Okay, so I want to repeat the motion one more time. This is time to revisit what we are debating against. So I want to draw your attention to some key phrases here. Exhaustive mathematical analysis is an overkill. Yeah, no, it's okay. I'll have some animations later on. So exhaustive mathematical analysis is an overkill, and it should be deprioritized, and instead we should prioritize iterative experimentation, even for life critical systems. Okay, so that's what we are against. So the first point I want to, confusion, it's a misunderstanding, I think, on our part of the positive team. that I want to dispel is exhaustive does not mean exhausting, right? Astronomical tables might sound exhausting, but that's not what we mean by exhaustive. Newton's laws of motions, that's how we predict position of satellites and planets. We are not talking about running a gazillion simulations to talk about or think about all possible combinatorial interactions that may arise, as we heard our esteemed speaker earlier describe. We will prove the correctness of the termination of a scheduling algorithm by modeling how the different threads interact and then showing that the algorithm terminates, right? Just like we saw the keynote speaker describe from his speech, Steve Chen, yesterday, in the analysis of the scheduler on the Mars rover, right? So that's what we mean by exhaustive analysis. And proofs can include, in fact, the rules for adaptation and resiliency. So that's not an overkill. In fact, it's a killer app for proofs. My second point is that, okay, let's move. High-stakes systems actually run on math, not on vibes. Okay? In life-critical systems, you don't get do-overs, and in data scarce systems, there's not a second crash you can recover from. Expensive domains can cost millions of dollars just to run one test, or years, right? Quick example, again, proud of Illinois. So LLVM began as a research project at University of Illinois, and now it's the foundation for most modern compilers, powering systems at Apple, Google, NVIDIA. And the success came not from trial and error. Of course, there's a lot of experimentation and system building involved, but from modular compiler design grounded in formal semantics. Now, I want to make a third point. Yeah, this is about high-stakes systems. Those are the examples I wanted to put in front of you. Now, this third point I want to make is important. Okay, so empirical exploration needs mathematical boundaries. Yes, experimentation is very vital, but without a model, you're not exploring a design space. You are stumbling around. So I'll give you an example in semiconductors, right? So there was a 31-year gap between the invention of the red LED and the breakthrough that led to the blue LED. So Suiji Nakamura spent years growing and testing crystals. It's an adaptive iterative process, but not randomly. Within the range narrowed by semiconductor theory to two materials, gallium nitride and silicon carbide, right? Those boundaries from physics and math defined where you can do the iterative improvements. Without that, there is just no hope. He succeeded because of the theory defined by the boundaries in which iterations could flourish. So this is very important to bear in mind. Okay, now I have a couple of pleas to this audience. Okay, so this is a very privileged, august crowd, and we should be the ones thinking long-term. So taking the long-term view, I would like to plead that we should teach abstractions, not just tools. Tools change, concepts endure. Iterative improvements can come down to learning to build something today, and that there is value in hands-on experience, of course. But if we teach them concepts like stability, invariance, and gradient descent, then those can translate to a wider range of systems: drones, cars, electric grids, even safety of the future AI-based systems. And finally, I want to finish by saying, let us not become the junior AI team, okay? Let us be the bridge that brings AI to high-stakes systems. We are at a stage where electricity was about 100 years ago, and it was deemed to be a very dangerous and powerful new technology. And there were displays. Thomas Edison actually electrocuted an elephant to demonstrate the dangers of AC current. And but ultimately the principles got invented and discovered, Ohm's law, and how to ground systems and how to have circuit breakers and so forth. And that's what led to the dissemination or the diffusion of the technology for the benefit of society. So this house should reject this false choice between math and iteration, because rigorous thinking is not an overkill. It is the cost to go from demos to having societal impact.
All right, all the good points have already been made, so I'm going to be very brief and address the question of cost, right? So one of the important points was that the methods being overkill, which I chose to interpret as they are not cost effective, or maybe even infeasible, right? So if they're not feasible, then of course we cannot do anything, but the good arguments have been made that applied right, they are quite feasible. So first of all, I think we all agree that life-critical systems need confidence, and there are different ways of achieving the right level of confidence. My argument would be that mathematical guarantees as means of achieving the right level of confidence is not necessarily more expensive than the level of confidence that you can reach by extensive iterations until you get things right, right? With iterative and experimental methods, to achieve these high levels of confidence, you need enormous amounts of expensive data. You need tons of lengthy and potentially dangerous experiments. And if you look at the autonomous vehicle literature, they say, oh, they need to drive this many billions of miles, and there is not enough time in universe to get the right confidence. And then the next paper comes out and says, hey, no, we don't need to drive this many miles. We can do barely 10% of that. But in order to decide what sort of how we can reduce the necessary testing, necessary experimentation so much, requires rigorous analysis of the right parts of the system. On the other hand, rigorous analysis, yes, it can be pretty expensive, and it's certainly infeasible if you try to use it as a kind of blunt force instrument and try to verify the whole system, and you don't want to do that, right? Through careful modular engineering, applications of rigorous analysis can be made efficient, and I want to close with the same example that we started, nuclear power plants, right? It's extremely complex physics. The state space is huge, but if you talk to the people at the Nuclear Research Council, the first thing they would tell you is that the only safety critical part of a nuclear power plant is the shutdown system, right? It's something that is independent from the highly complex processes inside the reactor. It's something small enough to be verified completely, and that's what that has been done, and that's what we should be striving for, and we should complement through good engineering. That's the path to success.
All right, wonderful. So my summary, math works, formal methods work. They have worked for our nuclear power plants. They have worked for our trains. Don't vibe it, math it, model it, and maybe it is not that expensive, and maybe the counter path is also expensive. That's my summary of this. But at this point, we're going to open it up for the arguments, and I'm going to, as moderator, I'm going to, again, usurp the right to ask one question. So this is, I'll ask one question, and then I'm going to open it up to the rest of you. As I said, folks who are questioning the affirmative team, please go on the affirmative team side, and people who are questioning the negative team, please go to the other side. So I have one question that I would like to put up. And I'd like to sort of draw in a little bit more on the human component. After all, we're building all of this stuff for us humans. We like to learn from Mars, but we are not on Mars. So we have to deal with humans. And the question is, to what extent should we include, and what role do humans and human-driven processes play a role for either side? Humans are not just varying, they also exhibit varying tolerance to change. They have processes, firefighters have processes, they're not necessarily willing to change their processes. And humans also have a completely different tolerance to errors and safety violations. I'm willing to go in an autonomous car that suddenly breaks, somebody else might not be. So how should CPS systems adapt? How should CPS systems protect? At an individual scale and at a community scale, because decisions you make as an individual may affect the community and others. So what happens when humans are decision makers and humans are the targets of these decision makers? So it seems like you're advocating for a risk tolerant society and you're advocating for a risk averse society because things are everywhere and everything becomes high stakes. So you want to?
Sure.
Please
So
line up for questions.
I would just ask, next time anyone on, God forbid, have a serious disease, would you take an unproven drug, mathematically proven drug? They are not there. We rely on studies. Ultimately, the decision as to what level of should something be deployed or not and all is a political decision, an economic decision. It's not mathematicians to make. That's the mistake we saw time and again. So, and that's not just only bit security. Cryptography provides as close to mathematical guarantees, and yet we have layered security systems because humans touch our mathematical systems every place. We don't yet know how to model these things. So,
yes.
Quick follow-up.
And then I'll pass it to the others.
I would argue it's too late. We live in a risk-tolerant society. Every time you get on an airplane, you take a risk. This was actually showcased pretty heavily in a flight from Atlanta on the way here. Very scary. At a certain point, you start to trust these systems, and there is this sort of societal acceptance, and that's what really drives everything forward. I'm glad I was able to fly here. Driving it would have been a very long drive.
walking would be provable, but
Yeah. It would have been pretty brutal.
And maybe I can add also that, with humans, this is actually a good example of a system that is, very complex, very poorly understood, our cognition, how do we make decisions, what's going to make us do this versus that. And so in future systems where, software is interacting with people are part of the decision-making in the loop, it's very hard to, prove properties of the overall system and what it's going to do under certain conditions when people are part of it. And so this is also another reason for maybe rethinking how do we do design, and perhaps be okay with the complexity, but indeed, have some guardrails.
The negative side?
All right, so I'm very glad that you brought up drugs. So first of all, we are not arguing for proof only or iteration only, obviously, and I hope you. Oh, you need to turn it on?
No. Yeah, because there's.
Is it electric or what? It's on. Okay.
It's been formally verified.
Okay. Safe to use. Right. So of course we're not arguing that you just prove and then start using it. We all know that no system, no matter how well proven it is, it's not kind of going to work in all contexts. But the proofs give you the limits of applicability of guarantees that you have. And if you look at drug developments, they start, in fact, with something that they can rigorously and exhaustively analyze at the chemistry level. They look at, these graph things that are, in fact, rooted in physics. They analyze and predict how drugs would affect humans. And then they start trying. And then they realize that the models don't give you everything you need. And that's where experimentation guided by predicted properties start. And okay,
You want to respond to this phase or leave it for later?
Leave it for later, because we have good lines on either side. Yeah, are we good? Okay.
Oleg dropped the mic.
I just want to make the point that we agree that the risk tolerance is really a social construct. The question really is, after the society has set the desired risk, what can we say about it? And we need techniques to analyze, hopefully using models, whether that risk is what we are going to observe in practice, right? Because typically we don't want to exceed that risk. And hopefully we have several regulators enforcing that these risks are observed. Right.
Thank you. So we'll start with one question on either side, and we'll keep going till time's up. Okay.
So my question for the affirmative team. So your argument is about let's apply, deploy, learn. I'm reading from a blog from the CEO of Starsky Robotics. So Starsky Robotics is the first company that was able to get legal approval to run autonomous trucks here in California. They raised more than $20 million for their operations. And the CEO said in 2020 they had to shut down their operations. And they say no one really likes safety. Everyone likes features. However, the biggest limiter of autonomous deployment isn't features, it is safety. Then he goes later on to talk about the difference between reality and expectations of AI. He shows the expectations of AI was going all the way up, while reality, it is limited, and safety is all the way up there, and AI is not able to get us to safety. So this is an example of a company that spent millions of dollars trying to do this, adapt, deploy, learn from there, and they couldn't succeed.
Maybe they didn't know how to adapt. But more seriously, I mean, there was a comment made that iteration and all is good for demos. I don't think Mars Perseverance was just a demo. I don't think LLMs, which are now penetrating a lot of societal processes, are just demos at this point. I think the issue is that this community has tied itself in the kind of thinking that you are advocating and the kind of thinking my opponents here are advocating, which is until we are satisfied that this is going to work, we just hold still. And I don't think that's a healthy thing to have. Yes, when we build systems at component level, sure, I would like my adder to be working. But efforts to prove processors and all don't get adopted. So they don't scale.
So I want to add one thing. I actually, in fact, think that Oleg kind of argued our point in some sense. And so I'm going to use his point to answer your question. The thesis just says, the motion says that exhaustive mathematical analysis is an overkill. There's nothing wrong with guardrails, right? So, like Oleg said, you can have a nuclear plant. I mean, that's a terribly complex system and dangerous, and it can do whatever it likes. As long as you just have a shutdown thing that you can turn it off, it'll be fine, right? So you just have a guardrail. So you just wear that helmet, and then you can do whatever you like and have whatever AI in that brain that you. And so maybe they just didn't invest in the right guardrail, and that's also an opportunity for innovation. What would be the right guardrail? But with the guardrail, you can now have go crazy, right?
So I think your example perfectly goes to the point of just social perception and norms, right? We have this expectation that autonomous vehicles out the door are going to be 10x better than humans. the reality is that 50,000 people in the US alone die every year in car crashes, right? So what is one truck on the way towards a goal like that? The difference is when a truck like that crashes, if it has data recorders on it, if it's collecting the data, we can reintegrate that data like the black box from an airplane back into the system and prevent it in the future. I can't, teach kids how to drive better and necessarily prove that it's going to extend into the next generation of drivers. In fact, I think it's getting notably worse. I don't know.
Do you have a quick response, or we'll move to the question?
No, I think it's very symptomatic of how AI and these technologies are perceived, actually. The hype is there. Of course, these are very powerful technologies, and we have to embrace these technologies with the appropriate guardrails. Our argument is not against experimentation or AI in any way, right? It's about taking this official position that we should deprioritize modeling and thinking about system before building them, right? So that's the key part of the thesis that can be quite dangerous, and it can encourage this kind of thinking that, okay, let's raise some funding, let's create a program, let's build some systems, and hopefully it's going to work out. And often it doesn't, and at a very high cost.
Okay, thank you. I'm Swapnil. I work with ST Microelectronics, and our sensors are in a lot of safety critical systems, such as satellites, medical devices, and even cars. So first I want to start with the use case. So I'm in the algorithms team, and earlier our algorithms used to be purely symbolic. Challenge is our customers were not really happy. They were like, oh, your algorithm is not generalizing to this corner case, or your algorithm is not personalizable. And a lot of stuff was often overlooked. A lot of corner cases were overlooked because it did not have the right data. Then we switched to neurosymbolic AI, which is what the Affirmative team was saying, that you have AI with some guardrails. The results are very promising. Not only were we able to guarantee safety, but we're also able to add exciting new features. We're able to improve the accuracy, while at the same time have some robustness and safety guarantees that work quite well with our customers. So my question is, like, do you think that neurosymbolic AI, where AI is, of course, the key factor with some guardrails coming from symbolic programs, and state space models. So neurosymbolic AI and state space models, do you think that it's going to be like the next frontier where we can do formal methods, but using a data-driven iterative approach?
Thank you for the excellent question. Actually, I would like to take this opportunity to say that guardrails is their own thing, right? So it's this side's argument, not the other side. Because guardrails are safety, provable safety that you add on top of an unsafe potentially system. So thank you for making the case for us. And of course, we believe, or I believe that neurosymbolic is the future towards enabling safe AI deployments at large. Not all AI problems can be guardrailed. For example, language models are notoriously hard to specify what is correct, as in any kind of non-formal construct, right? Like language, and it's becoming something very abstract, something ambiguous that you cannot really control. But for certain applications, I think neurosymbolic and guardrails is the future.
Any quick comments? Or?
So I congratulate them from having discovered helmets.
So actually, I want to say that it may be that we're agreeing, consensus emerging that we indeed do not need to exhaustively mathematically analyze the system. It is an overkill because all you really need to analyze is this teeny little piece that's the guardrail, that's the helmet, not the actual system.
Next question.
I want to just add quickly. Someone commented for this OpenAI ChatGPT, the wrapper is the moat. The guardrails are the things that are adding the value to that product.
So what can I?
Okay, quick rebuttal.
I actually, one interesting thing about the LLMs actually, and this is something that we've, in part started working on, is that for a large category of systems, the LLM comes up with some answer. So you ask it like a question, it searches everything it knows, and then it tells you, oh, the answer is this, and you can find it here. And then it's very easy to actually just double check, like fact check, go where it told you and see if that's you find what it told you, you're going to find there. So a lot of the time, the actual fact checking of the LLM is really easy. This is a category of problems where it's really hard to come up with a solution, but it's usually easy to verify the solution once somebody told you. And that's a great opportunity to guardrail LLMs.
So one thing that's, so the part of this debate involves safety critical systems. And one dirty secret that we as engineers don't talk about is before our technologies go and get realized, people have to die. And people die building bridges, people die testing airplanes. And one of the reasons we need good mathematical methods and we do that effort is we can make the design process safer. So before you get self-driving cars, you minimize the number of people that your technology ends up harming, killing. And so when you go for iterative, adaptive designs in a safety critical world, what you're saying is, I am just not going to change the status quo. I'm not saying you're making it worse, but you may not change the status quo. People will die until you get that safe guardrails built for your LLMs, because the guardrails are adaptive as well, right? So tell me a little bit about why not get some PhDs to work on some math to make things better, maybe save a few lives because we design things, our first iteration is a little bit better, maybe not perfect. Isn't that a good argument for trying, as opposed to saying it's not perfect, let's not do it, let's just try it and see what happens, right?
So a couple of things. Sometimes we don't have that luxury. We lived through pandemic. That was a great example. If we had waited for even that initial proof at the chemistry level and all, maybe we would still be waiting. So I think a lot of times we have that urgency. I would also argue that don't let a perfect view of safety come in the way of much needed progress on some very critical things. To pick up on Anthony's point, we hold these AI systems that they will be better than the best driver, whereas really their role is they're better than most drivers. And they're already demonstrating that in terms of miles driven and things like that, right? I mean, so yes, I kind of take your point that even the process of iteration has its risks, but that's one we pay as a society, and that's why we take part in drug trials. That's why we take part in new emerging technologies, fully knowing what the risks are. And as long as we are not forcing someone, I don't think there's an issue of ethics that arising there. And of course, we put guardrails, right? I mean, they're passive guardrails. They don't need the mathematical proofs, at least not at the level that we are talking about in this community. So there are sort of good measures. So yeah. And by the way, I don't think our grad students sign up to die.
Any quick rebuttal or any quick comment?
So I mean that makes perfect sense, and of course the risks are there, and we all take risk, and the society collectively decides what risk is acceptable for a particular domain. And at some point, as we did with the aircraft, we decided enough is enough, enough people died, and we switch modes and we become more rigorous, and a lot fewer people die. And so with all due respect to Georgios and the automotive industry in general, so in automotive, it's very different from aviation. People die one by one, as opposed to plane crashes, and that's why we have a lot more people dying in car crashes than in plane crashes. Is because the society hasn't said yet enough is enough. But if they did, we could make a lot more progress. And autonomous driving with the right guardrails, hopefully verified guardrails, will improve safety dramatically.
So what exactly is high stakes is up to society. I see. Chris?
Okay, so given how much experimentation is already going on without a helmet, and given that hope is not a strategy, how do you obtain the necessary formal information to establish the models, do the analysis, put guardrails in place before someone's killed, before you have to go get the black box.
So unfortunately, I don't think you can always do it before. There are always unknown unknowns, all right? And so you cannot put guardrails about against things that you don't know about. So the first time somebody absolutely dies, right? And then you kind of figure out what's wrong and you can start putting guardrails. So it's an iterative process, both on the kind of design side and on the assurance and kind of confidence gaining.
Thank you for that response. We appreciate it.
Right. All design processes are iterative, right? Also, the point I would like to make here is that even though you don't know in advance, you can make predictions, right? You collect data, you build models, and with these models, you may make predictions of what might go wrong, and then build guardrails for that. And with this process, you may reduce, as Sriram implied, the bad outcomes that might happen, right? You may not get everything because your model may not be accurate, but that was the knowledge that you have. We cannot do math without a model, and the model is as good as the data that you have used to build that model, right? So, yeah.
So it sounds like predictions are basically at best statistical estimates, and we need to collect more data, right?
Well, the apple always falls down.
Perfect.
You have to start somewhere, I guess, right? Yeah. All right.
So we are in CPS Week. We are all teachers and researchers of cyber-physical systems. I would argue there's been a lot of discussion about building products, but it is also, at some level, at least in my opinion, that it's our responsibility to understand and explain these systems, right? So there is industry building these things, but as researchers, we are not driven by products, but it is on us to characterize, understand these things. And at some level, saying that the process of detailed understanding and modeling is exhaustive seems to be somewhere between defeatist and not fully acknowledging our responsibility, right? So I would argue from the statement, it seems like we are running away from one of our core responsibilities, which is to characterize, understand these systems in a rigorous way, so we can have it work for everybody else, for those that are building these systems.
So I think, from the perspective of sort of educating people on how things work, we have been and will continue to make progress on understanding systems. And in fact, even in my statement, I said that we indeed make progress on that. It maybe is, trailing the cutting edge. It's kind of logarithmic instead of linear, but we're making progress. I think the other thing is, can we build systems that we can use and that benefit society that we can only partially understand, right? So it's sort of, without exhaustive analysis, but we can partially understand it. And I think that's one of the frontiers that I think it would be helpful to think about. Are we today closer with formal methods, for example, to understanding LLMs exhaustively than we were understanding railroad crossings by formal methods, 50 years ago. And I might argue that 50 years ago, we're actually closer to understanding, let's say, railroad systems than today we are understanding really, formally how LLMs work. So the gap between the frontier and, we've made a lot of progress, but the gap to the frontier is growing. And so we may need to learn to use systems that we only partially understand.
So I think this actually comes down to the importance of picking the right problems to solve. I made an argument that this should be through observation. I think the research side of industry has a responsibility here to help bridge this gap, especially for researchers. Things like industry sessions and conferences, internships, sabbaticals, it's all sort of part of this process.
And I would go further. I think you're taking a bit of a myopic view of what constitutes understanding. For complicated systems, understanding comes by building and poking the system, observing the system intensely, sort of doing so, perturbing the system while it is deployed. And therefore, you design systems so that in a manner that will provide the necessary data for that understanding. The second thing I would say is that don't let our human notions of understanding come in the way. If linguistic people had their way, we would still be using very primitive natural language processing systems. Sometimes we just build and observe interesting capabilities and deploy and get the data, and then we go back and seek to understand. So I don't think understanding should necessarily be a prerequisite, and certainly not understanding the way we have traditionally viewed. Coming from an EE department, I often feel that we fail to teach our student anything more than Gaussian noise. Complexity, adversarial stuff is just foreign to them. And I think that's part of our failure, that we are stuck with these things that we can equationalize and not build and observe and iterate.
A quick rebuttal before we go to the next question, and then we'd have 3 questions on either side, and we need to stop.
I just want to thank this comment. I really appreciate it. I think it is important for us to distill knowledge and pass it on, and that's a big part of our responsibility. And yes, there are many kinds of understanding, but I think most of the people in the room would agree that an equation is a succinct way of capturing big tables, for example, and it's also reproducible. So once you have a succinct description of a system, it democratizes the knowledge. Other people can play around with it, test it, and build their derivative ideas based on that knowledge, rather than an artifact that has been built by some university that is very difficult to reproduce. So,
yeah. May I make also a statement? I hear this. I've heard this argument multiple times so far. Somehow that statistical analysis or statistical models are not formal, right? Actually, there's a lot of theory, a lot of conclusions. You cannot come up with conclusions from statistical analysis and statistical models without strong theoretical foundations. So I just want to make that argument that statistical analysis is formal analysis.
Yeah. So before I ask my question, right, I would just like to make a counter argument to the whole thing. I don't think it is either or. It is actually a mixture of things, right? In certain cases, you actually do need, the risk is too great, where you really do need to actually do the proofs. You need to actually figure out where the boundaries are. You need to actually figure out whether your monitor or guardrail is correct. In certain cases where things are not that critical, then you do need to actually do very, very iterative design. Sometimes you will find the envelope that you need to operate it, as was being mentioned, and then you do iterative design within that envelope. So, but coming back to this debate, I think one of the literal problems with the formal methods is you start with a model, right? And now the challenge is, and as Oleg actually mentioned, there are a lot of unknown unknowns. So the difference between reality and the models is unknown, actually. So even if you actually prove something, let's say on a state machine abstraction of a part of the system, when you actually go and deploy it, there is really no guarantee that the actual system will behave like this state machine. So how do you then even try to start thinking about that, because I said something is safe on this model, will it actually be safe in the reality? And how much of the risk is actually that your proof is, even though mathematically correct, it actually doesn't apply in reality?
All right, so to your first point, Abhishek, several of us tried to say the same, and we were told we were not allowed to do that. So, but to your second point,
we have to synthesize at the end. So
yes.
So that's getting towards that. Yeah.
Exactly. So to your point about models, so the good thing about the process of building formal models is it also allows you to elicit assumptions that go into the modeling process. And that gives you kind of a chance at runtime to start predicting when this is sort of to be aware of the limits of your model and look for cases that are not covered by your model where behavior of the system is likely to start diverging. And so this kind of awareness allows the system to be more robust, be more safe.
Can I add something? So let me say the same thing in a different way. You know what one of the biggest criticisms of string theory has been? It said it's not even wrong because it does not produce testable hypotheses that you can falsify. And so this thing about creating models and proving things about models under some assumptions is that, okay, if the assumptions are violated, you can at least modify your model and then come up with a maybe stronger model, which is more likely to be true. Otherwise, you are doing things which are not even wrong.
This is an interesting question about models and their relationship to reality. Models can help you test also the hypothesis that the model produces, right? So you say, okay, I'm going to run these tests to validate that the model is correct, that is accurate. And going back to physics, without theoretical physics, we would never find out through experiments where some particles exist or not, right? So models can reveal to us knowledge in practice that we didn't know. Yeah.
Do you have any quick comments? I think what we want to do at this point, because we have closing statements from each team and we also have a vote to take, I'm going to give each team a couple of minutes to sort of collect their closing statements, and then we'll open up them. I think, again, we start with the affirmative team and then we'll start with the negative team, the final closing statements. They're discussing, but while they're discussing, I think what Abhishek pointed out, there's the idea that, how do applications influence these design boundaries? How do applications influence this trade-off between how much resilience, how much performance, how much adaptivity and flexibility, how much cost does that incur? There's no free lunch in this setting. So I think, perhaps one aspect to think about is, we're designing tuning knobs, but how do we design these tuning knobs for safety and for adaptivity, and how much do we turn each of these knobs? And should we do it in a generalized way? Should we do it in a very application-specific way? So, some applications will have the safety knob turned high and flexibility knob turned low, and the other ways around. And how do we do this if we have to turn these knobs in a data-driven approach and we don't have the data? What do we do when we are in a data-rich environment? And are these knobs affected by the richness or the lack thereof of the data that we have in these kinds of settings? And what consequences? So what can my CPS do? What will my CPS do? What must my CPS system do? Is really a question, I think, for the audience. And before I leave, I had two questions that I thought, is food for thought for the audience. How does all of this and this debate change the way we think about CPS education, right? Many of you here are the next generation of CPS practitioners, researchers, and how will a paradigm shift, as the statement is calling for, or the motion is calling for, affect how we should be changing the educational practice? Should it change or should it not? The second question I had is, what should we tell the community to expect? What is the messaging that we give users for the next generation of CPS systems? Maybe at an individual level, at a societal scale. Are there ramifications for society? And how do we expect trustworthiness at an individual level to translate to trustworthiness at the societal level, or the lack thereof? And I think, what should education and researchers do? What should communities or people who are using these systems do? And does it influence policy, law, liability, regulatory compliance? So I'm sure all of you have lots of thoughts on these, and maybe food for thought for the next remainder of the conference and maybe the next conference as well. So at this, we will move over to the closing remarks from The affirmative team, as is the practice, and then the negative team. Do we go to the slides?
I have to, no, I don't.
Okay, you don't need slides, okay.
So firstly, I'll draw attention to a very key phrase in the motion, prioritize. It didn't say replace. So the question we should really be asking is, what's the relative priority of the two things? Exhaustive mathematical analysis versus iterative, adaptive design process and systems. I would like to submit that I think we have proven what the motion is asking for extremely well. And in fact, sometimes our esteemed opponents out here actually made the case for us. So, some of the things. Iteration does not mean irresponsible. Okay, I heard that quite a bit. That's not how we create systems. In fact, we do human subject studies. We go through guardrails posed by institutional review boards. There are protocols in place. And yes, there are risks, but progress comes with taking risks. Otherwise, we'll still be walking. Second point that I would like to make, and I think again came out quite a bit, that iterations are needed to actually figure out that gap between what the initial model might have versus the reality. And that's why we see architects, system builders and all try out ideas, because only when we explore that very hard to formalize space of complex systems would we be able to kind of understand what's going on. So iteration leads to data that leads to figuring out what the right model might be down the stream, but or certainly kind of backflow into the couplings. I would also argue that oftentimes we face a situation where systems proven fail because they forgot to ask the right questions. We had examples from aircraft industry, the MCAS failure, the battery fires. These were all well-proven certified systems, and yet they failed because the uncertain cases, the interaction, the unknown physics, and even what the questions were being asked were missed out on that. So again, sort of prioritizing iteration actually may lead to better formal methods work. Finally, another point I would like to make is that certain applications are very high value in the sense that if they succeed, the society has a lot to gain. I mean, obviously, medical / health science is full of that. We take risks, unproven cancer medicines, things like that, because, well, if they succeed, there's a lot to be gained. We don't wait for system level proofs or even sort of component level proofs. A lot of drugs get through this phase 0, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 trials, because at each stage they're assessing the real world edge cases, the uncertainties, stratifying their effects and all. So, and which is why kind of the failure rate is pretty high, but that's the cost we pay because we as a society face sort of some incredible challenges. So I would like to sort of close with those remarks and again draw your attention as you vote, which is the motion is what should we prioritize, and I think we have laid out the case very well that iterative design processes, collecting the data, those kind of things have to come first before you can kind of start doing. Don't hold back progress in the name of proofs. They may work for some of our conferences, but unfortunately, society can't wait.
Thank you. The negative thing, you get to rebut that. So this is still the pre-debate poll, so I'll only put the post-debate after you've heard all the arguments.
Yeah, so thank you. This was a very interesting experience for all of us. I will also focus on the phrase prioritization. Prioritization is a very slippery slope. And if you take this stance at this official level, I know it's getting recorded. There are very important people in the audience, the grad students who are deciding on their topic for research for the next few years, maybe program managers who are going to decide what kind of funding opportunities create next, department heads who are going to create slots for faculty positions in the future. If you take the official stance that we are going to deprioritize a certain broad set of research programs, that can be then weaponized, not necessarily in a very honest way perhaps, but people who have other interests to completely eliminate this type of pursuit, right? That's the danger of taking a position like this without carefully defining what exactly is the domain, how are we going to balance theory versus iteration, right? So this is going back to one of the points that Abhishek made, that the statement is too broad, and therefore to pass it without more caveats or scrutiny is really dangerous for this community. To say broadly, let's go and just prioritize iterations beyond modeling and theory. So that's the first point I want to make. And I want to raise the stakes of the debate. You know, there's another very important vote happening in Rome right now. So, done? Okay. So I want you to think about voting on a very important topic as you cast your ballot today. Prioritizing one way of thinking over the other can eliminate the one that is getting deprioritized, and these things can happen very quickly. Okay, so models can help predict risks and reduce the interim cost of iterative development. So that's the other societal benefit that we should keep in mind right away. And the other point I want to make is this education point. I think it's very important to think about the long term and what lessons we are going to pass on, what skills we are going to impart to the next generation beyond the immediate systems that we are going to build. And for that, there, again, hands-on learning has a big role, but modeling and theoretical way of thinking about things is irreplaceable. Yeah, so the aircraft example has come up a few different times, and that I would want to remind you all is a failure in a socio-technical process, right? There's regulatory capture involved. It's not just about a failure of modeling or the certification process by itself. So we should prioritize synergy between experimentation and theory. And in the closing, I would just say that AI stands in crossroads right now. It has astonishing capacity, but it is not yet ready for the cockpit or the ICU or the power grid. And that's where the CPS community should come in with our deep knowledge of not just formal methods or mathematical reasoning, but also the deep understanding of these domains. And we should be the people who build that bridge from exciting demos to reliable and trustworthy systems in the cyber physical world. Thank you very much.
All right, so now we go on to the next round of voting. And so please scan. I think there should also be a card going out around. Yeah, sure. Yeah. Okay. If they vote, you have to vote. Okay. You don't get to vote. We know what you're saying. It's going to cancel out, right? Or vice versa. All right. Anybody didn't get the QR code? Because I'll go over to the Mentimeter that tells us where we are. Yes. Okay. I think I have the results of the previous one here. Okay, so it was 80 approve versus 55 don't approve. Remember, the winner is the one who changed the maximum number of mites. So we got to see how that's changed. So let's go back to the slide, and we are going to, sorry. Why is this not? What if the participation changed? Possible, but we can't control that, yeah. All right. Oh. All right. So the negative team wins the motion. So I did use the gavel. Thank you all. Thank you. So I did look at the post, right?
This was amazing. I really enjoyed it.
Yes, we should take a picture. So the total number of votes was higher.
There is a side by side.
Smaller. Let's see, how do I do this? Move.
Yes, please.
How do I say?
We have to take side by side the vote.
Okay, let me get it here. What's the? Let me go back to this, and yeah, you can do it. I think we just open it in a different window.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm doing. This is it. And
I think that.
That was the same.
okay, looks good. Oh yeah, please. The votes are side by side. Yeah.
Yeah, record it. So Oleg, please take a note.
Yes. Now you have the votes. Yes. I can go on the other side. You can then inside. Yeah. Just stop worrying too much. I can see. Oh, one more. Yeah, one more. One more. Thank you. Thank you very much for doing it. Thank you. Thank you, Nalini. Thank you so much. All of Tarek. It was really good. So we're not distributing it. Some people request it, but you think that it is helpful for anyone. We can discuss later, but some of the people from NSF said that it may help us.
Yeah, so I think justification, I put together all the slides and the votes.
No, but before distribution will take permission. We cannot just distribute as it is because it was recorded. So we'll reach you if somebody asks us for that.
No, I mean, I think this was actually kind of like the right, from like a funding perspective, this was exactly the right conclusion. Like community spoken, what do you keep?
You see, this is the right message going to the government. Absolutely.
But this was really,
This
really
is
right.
exactly speaks. I wish it was so much fun. I think everyone enjoyed it. I think.
And there were so many people still waiting for questions.
It's much better than panels. Panels you just go one way, you want to be that active. Did a great job.
That was amazing. We may be putting together all the slides. I'll share it with all of you, and then we'll see if there's anything you want to remove out of that. But I think it was Just the thought exercise was very interesting.
Yeah, the motion was great. I blame it to ChatGPT because it's the one that generated the motion.
I'm happy that Sayan started challenging the motion, because the motion is really, can be challenged significantly.